You referenced COVID in 2020 because we do experiential and that is all we do. So live events, you can imagine there were no live events. And ultimately, I lost 95% of the business just due to there not being any business and I had nothing to pivot to. So there's a lot of time to think in that space. But during those moments of sheer uncertainty and honestly fear of what was going to happen, I also found myself reflecting on how do I get better? And one of the big things I knew that I needed to do was improve my skills as a leader. So I have spent since the last 5 years, since 2020, working on my leadership skills. But sheer determination and stubbornness probably is what's kept me in the game. I know it's what's kept me in the game, and a lot of luck.
Hello, I'm Mike Ryan. I'm the Chief Networking Officer at PIMS, and welcome to our second season of Minutes with Mike. Now in my 33rd year at PIMS, I've had the privilege of partnering with companies both large and small, supporting their PR and marketing through customized fulfillment and distribution that delivers measurable impact on their brand perception, boosts positive affinity, and fuels their overall brand performance. And throughout my career, I've had the chance to work alongside many talented folks. This is their story. On this show, we'll sit down with some of the world's top marketing and business thought leaders to learn more about their success, how they got there, how marketing helped them achieve their goals, what strategies they used, and what inspires them. Please join me on this journey as we learn from those who are changing the way we think about business. So sit back, enjoy. You're listening to Minutes with Mike.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest Minutes with Mike. Today, my very special guest is Ms. Tara Wilson. Welcome, Tara.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm so glad to be joining you.
Tara is the founder of Tara Wilson Agency out of Fort Worth, Texas.
That's right. We are Dallas-Fort Worth based, but specifically we are in Fort Worth, Cowtown.
Love it. When I introduce a guest, it always brings up the thought of, how did I meet this guest? When was the first time I met this guest? And you are somebody that I talk about often when I'm talking to my sales team or the account team here, when we get a chance to go to some of the, the different opportunities of events that we go to, because there's nothing like face-to-face sort of connecting with people and having conversations, right? And I was lucky enough, I think it was at Beauty Matter, I was lucky enough, they were breaking for lunch. And of course, to me, doing that lunch thing is important to pick where you're going to sit, right? Because that's where you're going to have a lot of conversation. And as luck would have it, the gods gifted me a seat right next to you. I sat down and I looked over and we started chatting, and our friendship was born from that minute.
That's right. Yes, and I'm thrilled that I've gotten to know you. You've been a great friend and resource to not only my agency, but to me as I think about who we want to know in the beauty world. You are a plethora of knowledge, and so I've enjoyed getting to know you, Mike. I'm just excited to chat with you today and share my experiences with your audience.
So let's jump right into it. So how did it start? Like, I know you started your world in finance, but tell us how did it ultimately begin with you? We're going to talk about Auburn. I know you went to Auburn, and we have the greatest story ever to tell about this, but started from there. Did you always know you were going to be in marketing and PR?
No, absolutely not. No, as you mentioned, my degree is in finance from Auburn. I moved to Texas right out of college. I took a job where I was a financial advisor for 10 years. And ultimately decided that that wasn't the right fit for me. And so I left that job in 2007 and started an event planning company. So I did corporate, social, and nonprofit event planning. I always tell people there's no real profit in nonprofit work. And I also tell people that if you have a business and you're not making any money, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And so I did that till 2014. And around the summer of 2014, a light bulb went on. It took a while, but I was like, wow, my corporate clients that I'm doing work with, they're signing up with me and working with me year over year, whereas the nonprofit and the social events, I should say, so think weddings, milestone birthdays, those sorts of things, those were one-offs. But the corporate business was repeatable, and I realized, wow, this is something that could scale. And so that summer of 2014, I started to figure out, how do I change the business model? How do I just focus on corporate? And as I'm doing my research and I'm rebranding, I uncover something that I intuitively knew existed, but didn't know the name for. And that's experiential marketing. And I had experienced experiential by, going to races as an example. I'm an avid runner, going to sporting events, whether it be a minor league baseball or a major league baseball game. I saw how events and marketing were intersecting, just didn't know it was an actual industry. And I really thought brands, they do this internally. And the truth is, really big brands like our client Nike does not do this work internally. They actually work with agencies. So by 2015, the beginning of that year, I rebranded as an agency, completely decided to stop taking social and nonprofit work. And that was because I knew that corporate clients like Nike, I mean, I made a list. Who did I want to work with? I knew that they needed to see me as a serious experiential agency. And if I was still throwing in nonprofit and social activations, social events into that, my words weren't aligning with my actions. And so I chose to purely do experiential. And that's how it started.
A lot of folks that in that entrepreneurial startup sort of creation of the agency, they look to mentors, they look to people for guidance,
Mm.
whether it's family or friends or people within the industry. Can you point to anybody in particular that maybe growing up or postgraduate work that sort of ping that idea in your head? And because you looked at, I think about my mentor here at PIMS, who, I look to still to this day for advice and sort of feedback. Was there somebody that you looked to early in your career?
Absolutely. So I've always admired other people's success, even, you know, prior to the internet being what it is today and everything at our fingertips. I used to go onto people's websites and read their bios to understand, like, what their journey was like, because that bio was usually chronological, and I could see, okay, they did this and they won these awards and those sorts of things. But I also need to admit that I'm a Capricorn, and so I'm a do-it-yourselfer, and so I'm not always great at asking for help. But in the case of changing my business model, I did reach out to three different people who've been mentors to me to say, this is what I'm looking to do. So first person I reached out to, his name's Bob Kalinsky. Bob is a fantastic connector of people. He just also happens to do business development. My husband actually suggested that I get to know him. Bob had started his career at Radio Shack. Maybe some of your listeners are old enough to know what Radio Shack is. But he led marketing there as part of his discipline. And so he really gave me a lot of guidance early on in starting my business. Additionally, I reached out to a mentor of mine. His name's Brad Penman. He had been the COO at the marketing arm, which is a large agency out of Dallas. And I, as an event planner, had done some work for the marketing arm, and he was my direct point of contact. And so anytime I got to sit down with him and really like pick his brain about how the industry works and really how TMA had become so successful, I found his insights to be very valuable. I still have a notebook. We were on a business trip together, and I cornered him one evening, and I'm like, okay. And I just like had all these questions, and he was just free flow sharing information. And I didn't have anything to write on at the time, and I just really wanted to be attentive. And I can still vividly remember getting on the plane the next day and pulling out the notebook and just writing everything he told me. And I mean, I had like 2 solid pages of information that, still in some ways guide how I think and about business and operate as a business owner. So they've been really great. And then the third mentor that I went to, his name's Chris Huckabee. He owns a architecture firm. They build public schools. One day I said, Chris, I'd really love to know your story. And he's like, okay, Tara, well, I need to run a half marathon this weekend. And I'm like, okay. And so we literally ran a half marathon together. And that entire time, he just shared his story. It was a family-run business. He took over the business. He didn't tell his father at the time. Chris was in his 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and he decided that he was going to get an office space in Fort Worth because their office space was much smaller and out of the city limits. But he didn't tell his father. But it got back to his dad that he'd opened this office space, and one day his dad pops in just into his office and gulp, and he looks at him and he says, "Son, if you're going to take the hill, take the damn hill." And his point was like, if you're going to do it well. And, another one of those pivotal conversations with a mentor that I couldn't write anything down. And so literally the next day, I'm just like feverishly taking note from what he shared with me. So those are three great mentors who their advice was transformational for me. Whether I can truly articulate everything I've learned from them on this podcast, probably not. But I think about those key moments with them continuously when someone asks me about that.
Starting your own agency where it was just you at one point, right? Comes with its share of growing pains, of course, right?
Oh,
You've been written about it, been very vocal about it back in, the early 2020s with the drop in revenue in the business. Tell me about like how you overcame that, because a lot of people would have sort of just crumpled everything up, threw it away and said, let me just go back to what I was doing or go in another direction. How do you have the inner strength? I'm really curious
yeah.
about that.
Well, first of all, I don't like failure. I don't like being mediocre. I desperately want to succeed. We can maybe spend another hour in therapy as to what that's about. But, I have really big goals and ambitions. And when the going gets tough, I double down and triple down. And so you referenced COVID in 2020 because we do experiential and that is all we do. So live events, you can imagine there were no live events. And ultimately, I lost 95% of the business just due to there not being any business and I had nothing to pivot to. So there's a lot of time to think in that space. And I just, took on small projects that were virtual and that allowed me to continue to keep the lights on and operate a business. But during those moments of sheer uncertainty and honestly fear of what was going to happen, I also found myself reflecting on how do I get better? And one of the big things I knew that I needed to do was improve my skills as a leader. I have not always been a great leader and a great leader of teams. My past habit was to not provide feedback because I actually don't like confrontation and hold on to that feedback until it was just too much and then it was more of an explosion and at that point I'd made a swift decision and moved on. So I have spent since the last 5 years since 2020 working on my leadership skills and I'm an avid reader. I love to read, and that is how I build my skills as a leader, how I build my skills as a business owner. I have books here and books behind me. I would be happy to hold them up and say, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to read, 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 read. But sheer determination and stubbornness probably is what's kept me in the game. I know it's what's kept me in the game, and a lot of luck.
What is that saying? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? And it certainly has, because since I've met you and certainly been paying more attention to the agency, you guys are all over the place. Every time I go to LinkedIn or social media, I see some kind of a post with you. And, your agency's worked with a lot of big wigs like T and Samsung and Walmart. But, it's the work with Nike that I think I've focused a lot on because it's really kind of close to my heart a little bit.
Hmm.
I do with that experiential marketing is, the whole feel of community, right? And tell me about like, especially specifically working with a Nike, like what's the approach for keeping that authentic look while both working with what the brand wants and tying it all in, engaging the community all in one? How are you sort of working with that when you have such a large brand and you're trying to grassroots it?
Yeah. Well, there's a variety of approaches. So I'll start with my book recommendation. There's a book called Emotion by Design, and it's written by the former CMO of Nike. And it's required reading for my team because it really sets the tone for the level at which Nike expects you to execute and the level of storytelling, So that book really helps us define what it looks like to be an agency of excellence. And so it's really taking off your own hat, your own perception, and trying to get into the mind of the consumer that we are speaking to with the activation. And recognizing that when I don't know that, or I don't have someone immediately on my team that can put that hat on or be that person and really get there, then it's bringing in consultants to help us solve for the right things. At the end of the day, it's important that we're putting the consumer at the center and really focusing on the experience that they want. And then to the second part of the question about how you keep your ideas fresh, and you know, we are looking to what's culturally relevant and what's happening in our world and who's talking about what, and you're tying that back to the geographical location of where you're going to be, and then who can you get to amplify these messages and experiences, because oftentimes we create experiences that are can be deemed small in scale, meaning few people, you know, and if you think about the number of people that Nike serves globally, but we create an activation that has 500 people, the question is, how do we amplify that experience so we're bringing a full community into it, even if they couldn't physically be a part of it? And so that's a consideration that we do as well, that we have to have.
It's great. And, I found that term somewhere in one of your speakings or on your website or somewhere. I found this term creatively bold. And when I think
Mm,
of the Tara Wilson agency, that's what I think of, that creatively bold approach of things. Let me ask you about collaborations with influencers or in the social media space, right?
yeah.
Paid, unpaid. Give me your take on that, and sort of where do you lean into that sort of influencer marketing
Yeah,
space?
I definitely think they support in the area of amplification. So going back to my previous point about making sure that our activation experiences live beyond the in-person moment, that's really where we lean into content creators to be able to amplify the message on the front end and letting people know that, hey, this is here and it's available. Oftentimes many things that we're doing consumer facing are free and open to anyone. And then on the back end of that, it's building that brand awareness. So, we'll use Ulta Beauty as an example. So Ulta does their field leadership conference that happens in the spring. This next spring, it's happening in Orlando. And then tied on to that, bolted onto that, they now do Beauty World. And so, brands are thinking about, all right, how are we bringing our influencers into beauty world, because not everybody can be in Orlando experiencing this moment. And then how are we creating this brand awareness for ourselves? And then how are we amplifying this moment that already has a rising high tide? And it's through bringing in your own content creators who are there to amplify the message that you're part of beauty world, that you're part of this cultural moment that's happening. It's really important that those content creators are authentic to your brand, and we know that people are reading through if they're not, and it's just made up, and that they genuinely want to be there creating that content for you, and they're excited. And then when that magic happens, it's like utilizing the content not just then and in the moment organically, but then how do you use it as a brand, as your user generated content, so you're continuing to share what these influential, men and women are thinking about brand.
Great points. Couldn't have said that better. That was exactly what I was thinking, and as you were saying it, I was envisioning in my brain, like, personalization and customization, right? So,
Hmm. Yeah.
then tying in with the PIMS thing, our bread and butter is customized send outs, these personalizations, and with the
Yes.
beauty world, that type of customization and personalization could be anything from handwritten note cards to shade matching different types of product, and, every box is, or the unboxing experience, I should say, is very different for each person. How does that land on your end of things? Personalization, customization, what it used to be, 10 years ago was this was for people in this grouping, this was for people in that grouping. Now every box is different. Tell me about how the importance.
Yeah. Well, people want to be seen and heard. They want to know that when they're getting something from you, it's really intentional and meant for them. Another book, it's called Giftology. The author, who unfortunately is now deceased, he wrote about the fact that he thought about gifting and ultimately created a business around gifting that was personalized and customized to each recipient. One of his favorite things to give were Cutco knives, and he would monogram them with like somebody's wedding date or the birth date of a new child, those kinds of things. So there's the book that came out not long ago, Unreasonable Hospitality, which talks about the same thing about personalizing experiences and being so unreasonable in what you might do that it becomes memorable. And it's the same thing if you can implement that at scale, which PIMS helps us do, then the person on the receiving end feels cared for, noted, appreciated, and they're going to remember your brand. And so I think it's like a non-negotiable, quite frankly. And then when you want to think about experience and personalization, like on site, that's a whole another element that amplifies an in-person real experience. And I mean, Mike, you guys just did something at Beauty Matter in LA, and we went through the marketplace. We took away all these wonderful beauty items, and you all were the conduit for us to get it home. You provided the ship station, which was genius. It was game changing because normally I don't take these products home because I don't want to pack them in my suitcase and check them through luggage because DFW has the lowest luggage return on the planet. And so it's like, how can you think, and you guys did it, how can we create a personalized moment for an attendee that like amplifies what we do as a brand, but like adds true value to the recipient on the other end? That's the filter that brands need to be thinking through.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And Tara sent me a nice note after she had dropped off her package. I wasn't at that event, but she had said that she had gone through that. So I really appreciate that. I shared that with the team as well. Right. So Tara's a graduate of Auburn. You were asked to do the commencement address at Auburn, which you're still, you remain on their advisory council, but you're a proud graduate of that. And you had written prior to the lead up or when you were posting about it that you were, and I can't believe I'm saying this, that you were really nervous about speaking, in front of all those people and how was it going to come across? And because to me, you're the quintessential speaker, right? Like I look to you as somebody that like this woman can really speak to a group, but of course you're nervous and of course you're scared. How did that start? How did that happen? How did it go?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, true story. The email came across. I was on a call with a potential prospect, and the subject line was, commencement 2025 speaker request. Well, I immediately thought, oh, Auburn is tapping into me to help them find a speaker because 6 months prior, I'm a graduate of the College of Business, and we do what's called Harbert Day, and we bring in a big name speaker. And so they had asked me if I could ask Mark Cuban if he would come speak. And I had done so, and unfortunately wasn't able to participate. So I thought this was the request, was that, hey, would you basically go back to somebody else, maybe even Mark Cuban, and ask him to be our commencement speaker? So I'm just casually multitasking during my call, and I open up the email, and as I'm scanning it, I'm realizing, wait, they're asking me. I mean, I literally, I stopped mid-sentence in the conversation with Amy Parker. Amy is one of the co-founders of a women's golf apparel company called Honor. And she is one of kind of the early employees from Warby Parker. And so we're having this call, and I'm talking about sportswear and activations, and then I totally stumble all over myself. So that's how it happened. I got an email from the provost Nathan, and she asked me, I normally am a responder, like, no problem. I had to sit on that. Like, I needed that to sink in. I just, it was an incredible experience. uh, I'm at a loss for words to just tell you how moving and meaningful it was to me to be able to be invited and be a part of such a monumental moment for graduates.
What a life moment,
Amazing.
and something
Hmm.
obviously you'll never forget, but, like, I was just blown away by that. Tara, I know we're getting short on time, so I really wanted to get your feedback on some of the new advancements with AI and tech. I'm not the most technological guy in the world, and no one's
It's
knows.
okay.
I'm 59, so I give myself a little bit of a pass that, I was really good back in the day, and sort of the doing things hands-on approach, but now with AI and ChatGPT and all this stuff and immersive experiences, it's a little bit over my head. Tell me a little bit about your feelings on that. Like, how are you embedding this into your world now? How is it making things easier or harder? And where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, as an entrepreneur, I use AI as sort of a coaching mechanism, like putting my thoughts in of things that I'm experiencing in my business, and I'm looking for advice and guidance. So I just make it as, kind of a fourth mentor, if you will. My team utilizes it to run ideas and to support writing copy, as an example. There's a whole meme out there now about the M dash that ChatGPT seems to incorporate, and you can definitely tell if it's been copy written by chat just
I
because of that.
know.
But, in general, as an agency, we are thinking about how do we amplify through a digital experience, and how do we utilize technology in these moments, both when we're in real life and we've got a consumer right in front of us, but then that digital extension as well. Frankly, I have been underwhelmed by AR, if I'm honest. I think there's an opportunity for it, but boy, I've yet to find an experience that's AR driven that really feels powerful and
Agree.
impactful and community based, because it's such a siloed solo experience. So I have struggled with that. I want AR to be something bigger, AR, VR, and it's just we haven't landed on it. So anybody out there that's doing some really cool stuff with that, feel free to reach out. We'd love to know. But we are trying to utilize like digital moments, and so let's on the simplest of concepts here, creating photo experiences, but instead of printing something out, that's a digital experience that's shot straight to the consumer that then they can then share across their social platforms if they choose. So it's thinking in terms of how do we use tech in unique and creative ways. I know what we're seeing in the beauty industry is like the try on experience, which has been really cool as a way to like integrate product and amplify a moment. We're playing around with some of those ideas for a client for Ulta FLC Beauty World in the spring, as an example. So, just trying to think about how brands can use technology in a way that really gets their message and point across.
Where can we find you next? Like, what's new and what's next for the Tara Wilson agency as far as work? Do you have anything new you want to sort of drop on us that you'll be working on, and what events are you planning on doing in either the end of this year or the new year?
So we are already looking ahead to Q1 and Q2. So we are in the stages of planning for the Super Bowl, which will take place in San Francisco, and then also the NBA's All-Star game, which happens in LA following the week after Super Bowl. So those are two big tentpole moments that we're a part of for brand. And then, as I've mentioned, Ulta FLC is coming up in Orlando and right at the beginning of Q2. So we're in those planning stages as well for how some of our client brands are going to be showing up there in those moments. For me personally, 2026 is a big milestone year. I turned a big 50, and I'm looking forward to entering
Congratulations.
new phase of my life. I don't think it'll feel any different, but that's a big milestone moment that's coming up in January for me.
Well, congratulations, Tara, on everything you've accomplished thus far, and I know big things are happening now and the soon to be as well. And like I said, if you haven't followed Tara on LinkedIn and you haven't looked into the Tara Wilson Agency, most certainly should. I hope I see you very soon. I'll keep in touch
Thank
with
you.
some of the events I'm going to, so I'd love to reconnect. And, I know you're really busy, so thank you for your time, and I appreciate you coming on.
Well, Mike, thanks for having me and opening your community and platform to us to share what we do. And thank you for being such a great partner to TWA as well, helping us create those personalized experiences for our clients and being able to, like I said, make them really one-offs at scale is something that I value so much with our work that we do with PIMS. So thank you for that.
Thanks again. Take care.